Looks like we're ready to go. Jared Meyer, Forward for Good. How are we doing today?
Doing great, thank you. How
Well,
about you?
I'm doing fantastic. Just moved down Southern California. I'm excited. And as you can see behind us, business for good is ramping up its game, so we're going to ramp up our game. So we've got multimedia here. We got different camera angles on the sides, and we've got Jared Meyer from Forward for Good. Now, Jared, what is Forward for Good, and how did you get into something like this?
Well, Florida for Good is a program or a vehicle that we put in place here in Florida to help business user resources towards good. It's to help teach businesses that don't understand what that means. It's here to highlight those businesses that are already doing an awesome job at the consequences of their actions and being a positive impact on society. And there's various organizations that are doing that. So Florida for Good's goal is to try to connect those different organizations and then fill the gaps where they don't exist in an organization, specifically in Florida. And that's somewhat evolved into the hospitality industry as well. So we're trying to let business know that they can be extractive and exploitive, or they can be a great contributor to society. And we can show them how to do it if they don't know, or we can help improve their operations and give them suggestions, all for free, because our goal really is to try to improve society as a result of our efforts. And go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, you made a great point with businesses not knowing how to be used as a force for good. When you mentioned hospitality, I think, geez, how does a hospitality or how does a hotel or hotel chain use their business model as a force for good and use these types of principles? Could you let our audience know a little bit about your background in this space?
So I've been in the hospitality industry for over 20 years. I initially when I graduated college, I went to go work in my family business, which was hotels and timeshare resorts back in 1998. I started even earlier than that, kind of through summer internships and through high school, working at hotels down in Miami, which is where I'm from originally. But I moved to Orlando after going to the University of Florida and jumped right in working in the hospitality business and really learned what it meant to be hospitable. And that was a primary focus. Sustainable really wasn't a conversation, at least in my spheres in 1998. I had learned that much kind of later in life. I had probably some benefits on how I was raised earlier on in my life as a vegetarian, and having my mother's side of the family always being, you could say, sustainable in their way of living, but I really didn't connect the dots and understand until I guess I became a little bit more involved in the area of sustainability. But from a hospitality standpoint, with your question, we're trained to make sure that our guests have a great stay when they come to our properties. The goal is they don't get enough time off during the year. This is high quality time. We focus on families specifically. And so our goal is that they are not wasting their time, and that this is the memory that they have throughout the year until they hopefully return for vacation the following year. And I think most hospitality companies focus on that, because that's how you ensure return guests. And that's ultimately what our job is to be in service of our guests. But when it comes to sustainability, there's only so long we can do that for if we don't incorporate sustainability into our operations, whether that's environmental, whether that's treatment of our employees, whether that's engagement with our community. So in hospitality, we realized we had these various stakeholders that depend on how we operate our business. Whether we're successful or not successful, they're impacted by our decisions. And the more we can understand what that means and incorporate that into our daily decisions, the more sustainable we become. And it can be from an employee standpoint, how employees are paid, or what sort of benefits are provided to them. Ultimately, it comes down to what sort of feeling of belonging they have, being in our business. People talk about diversity, inclusion, and equity, which are all very important, but at the end of the day, that's just belonging, right? It's do I belong here? Can I contribute here? Am I really valued here? And so, we find ways to try to do that with our employees. Environmentally, it's trying to make sure that our actions aren't making the planet worse as a result of our actions. And if we can drive positive impact to the planet, that's awesome. And that is our goal. That's harder to do I think that many businesses will say that they're, a net positive, and I really think that's their goal, is to be net positive in all that they do, but it's still very hard to be that, right now. But we try to incorporate offsetting consequences to our actions, whether that's carbon offsetting, whether that's reducing energy use or water use, whether that's recycling. There's various things that can be done at a hotel. When it comes to community, a lot of it is, how we engage the community. Are we a good steward, and to our community, or whether, and that's not just simply donating money. Donating money is one element of it, but even a bigger part of it is, are we truly a contributor to the community, or are we kind of a taker? It's really as simple as kind of a giver or taker concept, and how we view our role in society and in our community. And then, last, this probably applies to all businesses, not just hospitality, is just how transparent are we with our actions, with our governance and with what we're willing to share. And, are we just highlighting the good things we're doing and hiding the bad things we're doing? So transparency is a big part of it, so that there can be real credibility and belief that we're doing what we're saying we're doing.
Interesting. So you mentioned, you said stakeholders. We do it through our stakeholders. You said employees, we're paying them more money. You said, renewable energies, or make sure we're efficient, net carbon neutral. And then you mentioned being in a community. And at the very end, you mentioned some governance. So when I'm thinking about this, I think, okay, so normal business ideas, normal business principles, but higher costs. I mean, you're dealing with, you got to pay employees more. Sustainable products aren't cheap. Being in the community takes a lot of time. It's a lot of opportunity costs. What's really motivating these changes in your company, and is it costing your business more, or are you seeing more long-term returns?
So it is initially costing us more. It's an investment.
Okay.
So, and I think businesses need to look at that like any investment. If we want to build a new hotel tomorrow, it's going to take cash from our business, but we're doing it because we think it's good for the long term. So there's definitely that element. I think everything we're investing will absolutely pay itself off. And I'm comfortable enough with the studies I've read and the conversations I've had that this sort of investment in a business makes financial sense. On a personal level, we're doing this because I think it's the right thing to do. I just think that there's a nice alignment between those two right now. It's a really, I think, cool time in our era where those do line up pretty well, where it's not just one, oh, well, this feels good, but it just costs a lot of money, or, hey, they're not diametrically opposed. They're intertwined with one another. And so I think that we are spending more money now. I mean, a simple example would be, we pay a living wage to our employees. That was expensive. That was, we decided to do that this last year. It was a commitment of about $350,000 more per year that we had to pay as a company. That was the most significant probably change that we've made, financially speaking, at least. But when you really, from the good person element of it, right? And you say, why are we doing this? Well, I live a pretty good life, and I have a lot of thanks to my employees for providing that. And just because I work hard doesn't provide me this life. That's one element of success. And when you know that an employee that's not getting a living wage can't afford rent or food or send their children to school, the basic needs that go behind a living wage, what good do I feel driving around in a nice car or going on vacation and knowing that my employees can barely get by? And the only way they can get by is through public assistance or loans from family, or maybe doing things they shouldn't be doing to, generate income. So how can I be a more responsible employer? And so again, from the feel-good element, that's very clear why we're doing it. But when you move beyond the feel-good element, our employees appreciate that too. And so we absolutely get loyalty as a result of doing that. They feel valued. When you look at statistics, and 70% of employees don't feel or aren't engaged at work, they're totally disengaged. And, how do you unlock value in your workforce? Well, you actually get them to work in the direction that you want them to work in, which is in alignment with the purpose of the company. So by having employees feel like they're valued, they're going to contribute in a much better way. So I think there's the feel-good component. I think there's a return on investment, component. Some of it will pay out quickly. Some will take a while to pay out. Um, but I feel very good about our decision so far.
So I like your answer, the feel good component of that, making sure, hey, I'm going on these trips, but my employees are struggling day to day. We're paying them more. Now the question I guess I would ask next is the employee compensation, is the higher compensation leading to this employee satisfaction? Is more money giving them more meaning and purpose in their life and fulfillment? Or is it more like, giving them more money is taking the ease off of paying the bills and it's creating more satisfaction? Where do you see the pay raise? And I guess what's your message to other employers who are thinking about giving their employees a raise and have these questions?
I would go the ease, the example that you just gave. And I would say that you try to put yourself in their shoes. I think any person has had difficulty at some point in their life financially. And the question is, when you're experiencing a financial urgency or emergency, how do you address all the other things going on in your life? You really don't give them much attention. You're not fully invested. You're at a meeting, but you're really not at that meeting. You're in a conversation, but your mind's somewhere else. And if you can kind of take yourself back to being in that same position yourself, and you realize I have a lot of employees in that same situation, you want them invested there in your business. And so I think just easing things up so that they can truly be present and aren't just thinking of paying their bills makes them a much more valuable employee. So I think that's the strongest part of it. I think that, from personal experience, that living wage program has been in place for a little bit less than a year. So I can't provide numbers and say that our retention rate has improved. I believe it has, and we will see that.
Yes, right.
About a year afterward. But I really think it is easing up their lives and making them feel like they can truly contribute now and not be distracted.
Amazing. Yeah, I mean, because that's a big step. I mean, $500,000 extra dollars or $350,000 extra dollars is a lot. And so that's one of those stakeholders you mentioned. And the driving factor, the motivation behind, like you mentioned, is the feel good component for your employees and benefit. But the next question I have is, we like to let our audience discover what motivates these real leaders like yourself beyond their chosen careers. What's the real, why pay your employees more to make them feel good? Why does that matter to you? Why care about the environment? Why make these long-term decisions? Climate change, why do anything about it? It's going to be fine by the time you and I pass away. Why do anything about it?
So I think elements like you just said might be fine by the time that I pass, but on a spiritual level, I think a lot of our problems that we're facing is because we don't realize how connected we are to all things. And not just to make this spiritual, but other people in pain and in harm affects us in ways that we just can't explain verbally, but we can perceive. And so I think a lot of the stress and a lot of the divisiveness right now in society is because there's a lot of harm that's out there. And so even those that may be seen, that may be in an ivory tower and feel like they're removed or apart from it, they're feeling it too, just in different ways. And I think for there to really be a calm or a peace of any sense, we need to address issues beyond even what's just kind of right in front of our face. And further, I want I want my personal lifestyle to be sustainable. It only can be if it is through business. And we need back to employees need to feel like they are invested and belong in that business. It isn't, and it isn't just a feel good thing. Our employees we want them to wake up in the morning and want to come to work. When it comes to elements of the environment, this is a planet with finite resources, and so there's no possible way that my businesses can continue to be around if we're relying on resources that are running out and we don't contribute. And it's certainly not right for us to expect others to do it without us doing it. And I've always kind of been a believer that if something's going to happen anyway, wouldn't you rather be the leader in making it happen first rather than a follower down the road? So I think that's part of what we promote also through the Florida for Good message is if you believe this is going to happen, even if it's in 5 years from now or 10 years from now, why don't you become proactive and seek it now? The market will appreciate you for it. Your employees will appreciate you for it. You might be the first in your industry or the first, to undertake these steps, but you're going to have to do it anyway at some point. So, again, why not be a leader and do it proactively?
And just to go off that point, I mean, you mentioned earlier you've been in the hospitality industry for 20 plus years, and it wasn't until what moment or what series of moments led up to this idea of, geez, I need to think about these employees and start thinking about the environment a little bit more and how this can generate profits. And what moment did you realize that, hey, other businesses need to be doing this too? And why'd you start Florida for Good?
So I'll give you the short part of what would otherwise be a very long story. And that
Sorry.
Before I had my own business, so Legacy Vacation Resorts is my hotel and vacation ownership company. But before that existed, I worked in family businesses in the same area. And we can say maybe the motivations behind some of the others that were part of those businesses were quite different. And a lot of times our epiphanies in life or the lessons we learn are because we went through tough times and you looked at how other people acted or did business or their morals or ethics. And then you decided that's not who I am or who I wanted to be. And so I find that I'm always learning. I mean, all of us are always learning. And I learned a lot going through an earlier phase of my life in the same industry, but with very different people surrounding me. And I knew that was not the way that I wanted to do business and the way that I wanted to engage with the world, at least from a business standpoint. And what ultimately ended up happening as a result of that was some tremendous pain. I had to go through a very serious family breakup because it was a family business at the time that involved litigation. It involved some of my businesses having to go through Chapter 11 at the time. And those are very long stories into themselves, but it was a very difficult time for me. And at the end of that process, I was able to form new companies to buy up the remaining assets of the Chapter 11 process. And when I did that, I knew I never wanted to engage back in business under any of the ways that I had previously. And it doesn't mean that they were horrible previously, but I definitely wanted to know if I was going to engage back in the business world on a full-time basis, it had to be, I didn't use the word stakeholder orientation at the time. I didn't understand it to that degree, but I knew that it had to be as a positive contributor, that if I was going to be acting in business, it had to be on the same terms I engaged in my personal life, where I felt I was always a giver rather than a taker. And so I didn't know how to do that, was the problem. So back in 2011, when Legacy Vacation Resorts began, I hired a few individuals to run the hospitality side of my company, and they're still with me today. And they were operating all the day-to-day practices, and I spent some time trying to figure out what I wanted to do, whether I wanted to re-engage in business, and if so, how I wanted to do that, and how I wanted to kind of live the new chapter of my life after going through a very difficult period of my life. And I started down another difficult period because, finding one's purpose and finding kind of the answer, it doesn't happen quickly, and it usually doesn't happen. It just is a path. You get a little bit closer, and
right.
And so I started that, and I actually started for the first time being a little more kind of spiritual readings, and started reading more up on Buddhism and Taoism, and really trying to understand where pain and suffering came from, and why I'm here, and why do I wake up in the morning? Why does any of this matter? And really understanding that that accomplishments are ephemeral. I mean, they disappear very quickly. So what can we do that actually lasts? And going through that process with a lot of ups and downs through it, um, I finally came to the point that I realized that if I was going to engage in the business community again versus pursuing a different path in life, my businesses had to positively contribute, and I just had to figure out how to make that happen.
Right.
So it started out with, while I was going through this process, I started a hobby, which was real estate development. So my company, Salt Palm Development, that now is a full-time business also, was just a hobby. I thought it would be fun to learn how to develop real estate over on the west coast of Florida. It was an area I enjoyed going to. I enjoyed a little bit. I live in Orlando, Florida, and I like getting away there, every now and then. And as
I
that
don't
turned
blame
into
you.
time, yes, it's a wonderful area, and I'd highly recommend the Florida beaches, which are no surprise consistently win some of the best beaches in the U.S. every year. It's quite beautiful over there. And so as I started spending more time there, and that became a full-time business unto itself, it really pushed me to consider, wait a second, why did I back away from the resort industry for a period of time? And now I'm getting fully engaged in another business. And yet I don't know that this business, we are responsible builders, and we have green practices, and we do try to offset the consequences of our actions. But am I really positively contributing? And I didn't believe that I was. And that's what really pushed me to do some more research. And that led to me going online and typing in, how do I use my business for good, or something along those lines. And from that search, I found certified B Corps. And before that, and this is only about a year and a half about now, so that isn't that long ago. But I'd never heard of certified B Corps before that. And despite actually purchasing from several of them, and I'd seen the logo before, I didn't know what it meant. So I started doing some research on it, and I was just floored when I found out what B Corps were, what it meant, that businesses were actually out there trying to change the world for the better, using their resources. And I knew right away that that was how I was going to go about it initially, was that I needed my businesses to be positive contributors. And so I contacted B Lab, and I said, I'm definitely going to become certified as a B Corp, but by the way, there's not enough of these in Florida, and Florida is the third biggest state in the U.S., third most populous, and we have about 16 or 17 B Corps here, which is kind of embarrassing, you could say. How can I help you? How can we get some more B Corps here? And through a lot of back and forth, that's ultimately how Florida for Good came into being. Was I realized that as good of a job as it would be to make my companies as B Corps, to make a large difference and a big impact, was I needed to help influence other businesses to join the movement. One, they had to learn what the movement was all about, figure out if they wanted to be a part of it, and then I wanted to try to help them join by providing resources. So I guess I'll turn it back. I could go on for probably a long time, talking about this, but really that's kind of how it's evolved to today. I spend the majority of my time with Florida for Good, trying to bring other businesses on board to be positive contributors, to society. My businesses are doing that now. They need to improve what they're doing, and they will. It'll never stop. So by no means, because we're B Corps, are we awesome and others are not. We just do walk the talk, and we realize that we still have a lot more work to do. But with Florida for Good, we want businesses to learn what we're doing and what others are doing. There's some phenomenal B Corps out there. There's some phenomenal companies that are, part of conscious capitalism and some other great movements. And we want to bring that to light and say, hey, if you believe in this, come get on board. Let us help you. If you don't, then that's fine too. I mean, I guess it's not fine, but I'd rather know who we need to be part of the movement and who maybe doesn't believe in it, or doesn't, because there's a difference between those that don't want to get on board and those that don't know how to get on board. Those that don't know how to get on board, we can help. Those that don't want to get on board, it'll just be a matter of time before they essentially need to.
Right. That's kind of like what you were saying. It's only a matter of time, and it's a series of things, and until you try to find an answer. And but I really like what you're saying, and I'm still learning what B Corps are and what these good businesses are doing. And, I've done over probably 400 plus interviews with social entrepreneurs, and every single one is in a new industry, and they're taking it on in different ways. So I guess for our audience's sake, Florida for Good, these good companies, what's the difference between like your previous company and your new company, or a traditional company and a company for good, I guess?
There's a quick version of the impact assessment, and there's a full version of the impact assessment. It's usually recommended that people try the quick version first to make sure that it's for their business, and that they like the questions they're being asked, that they're feeling that they're becoming educated going through the process. And we tell businesses that if you never become a B Corp, if you only use it as an educational tool, I can guarantee you're going to find value in taking the assessment. And I know that because I took it firsthand. When my first company, Salt Pond Development, became certified, I took the assessment myself without any help from anyone else. And there were questions asked of me that I didn't even understand what I was being asked.
Like what?
Search a term. Well, maybe the best example was I knew what greenhouse gases were, but I didn't realize how many of them there were. And I didn't know there were different scopes. So, there's scope, 1, 2, and 3. And when I was asked one, did we measure greenhouse gas emissions? And then 2, how did they vary at each of the scope levels? And did we have any targeted reductions, in place? I didn't even know how to answer the question. So I had to go online and find out, what were each of the greenhouse gases and what are the different scope levels, that are associated with each of these greenhouse gases. And it was helpful to learn that. But that was true in other areas as well. So, there's businesses who are definitely responsible businesses, and they'll take it and they'll say, wow, I didn't realize that I could be better in those areas. And then they commit towards being better in those areas. There's businesses that probably take it and then they surprise themselves and they say, wow, I actually am doing pretty well there. And I had no idea because we were not measuring that. And we get our monthly financial statements, but I don't get any other statements that tell me how I'm doing in regards to social or environmental metrics. And this is a great way to measure the other things that matter in a business beyond just profits. So businesses are encouraged to take the quick impact assessment, and then if they want to continue forward after the quick impact assessment, to move on to the full impact assessment. And so when a business finishes the quick, they're about 30% complete with the full. So you don't lose any of the information, you just move forward from there. And what's important to know is everything is confidential. You don't have to disclose anything while you take the assessment. It's entirely up to you if you want to be transparent. So with Legacy Vacation Resorts, while we were taking the assessment, we actually loaded our results onto our website before we became a B Corp. And so you could see how we did in the various areas. So I know right before we became certified, I think we were at 72 point something. And so I remember that being on our website. And I was anxious for us to move up above 80 so that we could get that listed on the site. And eventually we did. And if you go to our website now, you can see our score in the different areas. But the impact assessment it's great whether you want to become a B Corp or not, just because it helps you measure those areas. It gives you visibility, and it's done in a standardized way across, I think, 150 or 160 industries, 60 countries. There's about 70,000 businesses that use that impact assessment, yet there's only 2,800 B Corps. So you can see there's many other businesses that see value into this assessment beyond just B Corps. And so when you asked before about, how is a business for good, it starts with the basic premise that you have to believe business can be used for good and you're willing to do that. And that you're then willing to explore how you can go about that. And early on in the process, we recommend using the impact assessment as a great tool to get there.
And Jared, how do you measure impact? And is this a difficult thing to do for a lot of these new companies that are partnering with Florida for Good?
So using that assessment makes it a lot easier. Without the assessment, I think it's much harder because it's hard to contextualize what you're doing versus someone else, even in your same industry. So in the impact assessment, there's 5 key areas. There's environmental, community, employees, governance, and then customers, which deals a lot with the the impact of your business on your customers. And so by measuring each of those individual areas at the end of the assessment, I mean, I can look on there, for example, and say, how am I doing environmentally compared to Patagonia? So you can take an industry leader and you can say, okay, I see where my points are. And then you can use that benchmarking also to improve. You can learn areas and say, oh, that's interesting. They scored points in this particular section. And as you investigate a little bit further, you realize, maybe there's a new program that we could roll out that we were unaware of previously. Mm-hmm. So I won't completely change the subject, but like for today, we just signed a contract to put a very exciting new program in place at Legacy Vacation Resorts that we learned through Rhino Foods, who makes the cookie dough for Ben & Jerry's ice cream. It's an advanced program for employees. And I can go into that later. I don't want to hop off your question, but you learn about these great programs going through this benchmarking and just networking process with other great companies, and your business continually improves as a result of it.
So have you found working with good companies that are certified B corporations, they've been more open about sharing their techniques about how they've been able to score higher on the test and how they've been able to create more impact in the world?
They have. I mean, I would say probably the simplest and nicest thing about it is, generally speaking, people and businesses that are willing to be transparent and actually want to have a positive impact on society tend to be pretty good people. They're the type of people you like in your community. So if you're going to say, hey, I have all sorts of business conferences I go to, I can guarantee the ones that involve conscious capitalism and the B Corp community are going to be some of the best ones you go to. Oh, and the Momentum Summit, as you all promote. I was there as well. You get the same type of people there, the people that want to make the world better and are intelligently finding ways to do so with their businesses.
Yeah, what I found with every single person I interviewed at the Momentum Summit was they all were similar to you. They're in this traditional business, and then something had happened, something had changed, whether it was a spiritual whatever it was. I don't know how to explain that, but they said they were able to align, their skills with their core values in that spiritual side, and that's really what was motivating them to really make this impact and make this change. And it's good for everybody. So the next question I have, you're talking kind of about comparing your score to another's. Is this a way to kind of create comparables in the marketplace, and are investors looking at your higher score as a higher rate of return? Is there any correlation in that?
So it definitely is a way that you can compare in the marketplace. I'd say difficulty right now is only the certified B Corps have scores that have been validated by a third party. So I still encourage businesses to be transparent if they're not certified yet and put it on their website. But you can't know for sure, the same way as an audited set of financials versus internal financials. When they're audited, you can have faith in them in a different way. But you definitely can use those to compare in the marketplace and in different industries. And it'll never be perfect. And I'm sure if someone wants to pick it apart, they can find any question and say, well, this could be better. But I think if you look from a holistic sense, no one's doing it better than B-Lab right now. That spans the entire business. I mean, there's some great certifications for products specifically, LEED certification and organic for milk and fair trade. Those are great certifications, and everyone still should pursue those. But those are for a product and not for the entire business. And so by seeking that, you do get these comparables that you can use. But for businesses out there that aren't certified yet, though, and want to find ways to improve, they can definitely look at the certified businesses to help improve their scores. And then on your question from a lending standpoint, we personally have not experienced anything from lending or investments relative to our scores, but I am aware of, Danone did their credit facilities, the interest rate of their credit facilities was reduced as a result of their ESG metrics. Oh. And Danone has the most B Corp subsidiaries of any business that's out there. In fact, their subsidiary, which is Danone North America, is the largest B Corp in the world. And the parent company has already publicly committed to becoming a B Corp. So at some point in time, all of Danone will be a certified B Corp. But right now they have a ton of subsidiaries globally that are acting in that way, and it did help their credit facility.
Jerry, when you're explaining, so the certification process, when you're explaining this holistic approach, it's really hard for me to rationalize why I would do anything else, why I wouldn't do something like this. What's the biggest misconception that an outside company has about this certification process?
The first misconception happens through business training that a lot of us have had from earlier days. It's competition versus collaboration. If you are a firm believer that competition's how it always has to go, and that collaboration can't yield a positive result, that doesn't mean this won't work for you, but you're initially going to start off on the wrong path, because you're going to say, collaboration is sharing information to help other businesses do better. So I encourage every hospitality company to become B Corp, and anyone that wants to be can call me, email me personally, and I'll help them do that. That's collaboration. Right. Competition would say, hey, you know what? We were the first and only multi-state certified hospitality B Corp, and you know what's awesome about that? It's a differentiator, and we want to stay that way. That's not how I think. That's not how we think, but that would be a very different way of thinking. So I think that's at the very first part of it. So the misconception is that you can't be successful through collaboration. And I think there's a lot of research these days now that shows that's entirely false, and that those who collaborate will succeed, certainly for the long term, but I even think in the midterm, that they will succeed more in doing so. And that competition isn't the way to go about it. And that's just kind of more of our masculine business training, because the feminine business training is different on that. So I think that's one of the biggest concerns is how we're trying to get people to change how they think about business and business's purpose. And businesses are a tool for us to live our lives. We aren't tools for the business to use for the business to be successful. And so it's kind of framework. It's how you think about things. I think that's where most of the roadblocks start, is where you ask someone to explain their relationship to a business, and they don't even have to be an executive. It could be as an employee. What do you think of your relationship to business? If you view it that you're kind of being a tool or a resource being used by that business, then you're going to think of things differently than using that business as a tool or a resource. So I love the quote I heard. I think it was Simon Manwaring said it at the event at the Momentum Summit, and he said, "Look, says there's businesses that have a mission." He says, "But my mission has a business," and he said it probably more eloquently than that. But I 100% agree with that, and I've been using that since, because yes, I use my businesses to accomplish my larger mission of life, not the other way around. So I think that's a bit the hardest part. Once you can maybe move past that, or even if some people are caught up in that, I think the conversation then has to shift over to, okay, well, I don't know that I agree with you on this collaboration versus competition. So tell me why this is good for my business solely to do it. I don't want to hear the feel-good side of it. I don't want to hear the even just sustainability side of it. Like, why should I do this? And that's where I think you have to start going towards some of the studies that are out there. So Conscious Capitalism has put a few out. There's some university studies where they measure businesses that have a conscious culture, conscious leadership, and a stakeholder orientation, public companies, as compared to those that do not. And they can show that the ones that have acted consciously and had the stakeholder orientation outperform the others. And not by a little bit, but significantly. And what's interesting is all those businesses that act that way are not acting that way because they knew it in advance. I think some of this was realized retrospectively, that we're looking backwards and saying, oh, we didn't know this was a secret formula, but we can tell based on history that this is a secret formula. And conscious capitalism talks to that a lot. They call them unconscious conscious capitalists, that they are acting in that way and don't even realize it. And surprisingly, their business always does well. And they say, my business is doing well and it's always done well. I don't need to be part of that movement. They don't realize they already are. They just aren't proactively part of that movement. They've already been living by these. So I wouldn't be surprised to find many other businesses that already prescribe to these principles. and they just never attached themselves to the movements. And I think one of the reasons why I've had to become more proactive than others have is in the past, like I consider myself a private person. I have never been one to want to brag about anything that I've done well. I've never wanted to actually show up publicly on a podcast.
That's why we got you on. I was just about to say, we're gonna force you to see the world.
Where you're not going to find. I mean, I still don't have a Facebook account. I don't. I really enjoy my privacy. I think that's one of the luxuries in life. To enjoy. You can ask celebrities about that, and they'll absolutely say that's the greatest luxury when they can have some privacy.
Right.
But what I think I learned by talking with others, and it's kind of like the same principle behind the Giving Pledge, is doing good in silence right now, unfortunately, isn't enough. We have problems that confront society where people need to see leaders out there doing this and see that it's true, that people are really trying to make a positive impact on the world, and then using their experience to influence and engage others into the same practices. So I had to move out of my comfort zone because I think it's necessary. And I would really encourage any other businesses out there the same way that are kind of maybe happy in their own background, that they may be doing a great job with their business. But my message to them would be that we really need you to show others what you're doing, because they likely have a large influence, and they could bring a lot of other businesses to start acting this way if they saw that the success of that business is actually as a result of these great practices.
And I couldn't agree more with you, Jared. And that's how I think speaking of collaboration, I think we two are just so aligned. But just to go off of what you were saying with Simon Mayweather, the quote is, be a mission with a company, not a company with a mission. And our mission, here at Real Leaders is to inspire the future. And one of the ways we're doing that is like redefining kind of like what you were saying, like that alpha male leader, that alpha male company. And we're trying to say, no, the new alpha male is alpha female. It's alpha togetherness. It's being kind. It's being sharing, collaborating, and do, like you said before, do you want to use your business as a force for good? We completely believe in that. And so the question I have for you is, what advice would you give yourself before you made that turning point, before you made that turn to switch this company for good? What leadership advice would you give to the Jared Meyer 10 years ago?
Why is it in your personal life that you try to surround yourselves with people that are where you have a real mutuality in your relationship? And why do you worry about offsetting the consequences of your actions? And why do you live to certain principles and standards and values in your personal life and not understand that you can also maintain those in your business life at the same level? I definitely have. I mean, so much of it is, so I guess one of my personal epiphanies, I think everyone comes to their own conclusions on their purpose in this world, if they can. I really struggled with that. And I never actually found an answer. There was no answer that said, this is your purpose. But what I think where I got lucky was I was able to turn that towards in a positive way. And I think if one concludes that there isn't a purpose, or you just can't figure it out, why can't you set your own purpose? Why can't you say, you know what, if I'm gonna get up tomorrow and I'm gonna live consistent with some purpose, why can't I create what that purpose is? And therefore, what sort of world do you wanna live in? Do you wanna live in a world that extracts and exploits? Do you wanna work in a world that cares about the greater good? Again, each person can make their own choice. I certainly hope people don't wake up tomorrow and say, hey, I heard Jared say that, that's great, I'm extracting this. But for me, I only feel comfortable when I'm a giver. I only feel comfortable where I feel like I'm doing good. If I don't feel like I'm a good person, then everything else isn't good in my life. And so I've really tried to structure my life in a way that I can feel like I'm consistently doing good. And I'm sure I screw up along the way too in doing that. We all do.
We're
Uh,
human.
but I bring an intention of doing good into my day every day. And I think that's what's important. And so I try to think through it along those ways because I feel good in doing that. I mean, it's not, it's not selflessness. It's actually selfishness. I mean, I'm doing this because it makes me feel good. It's not like, and that's what some people don't realize. Some people absolutely do realize that. And that does come out of, I think, the spirituality is really trying to look at how do you attain fulfillment into yourself. But it doesn't have to be happiness, but how do you feel fulfilled? And also what causes you suffering. I think those are the kind of the two parts of the coin that we are always grappling with. And how do you maintain a consistency through all that you do? Because that's where I think a lot of our suffering comes from is, is not being able to live your values. It's, if you can kind of have a consistency of thought and action, then you flow and you're actually in this kind of, calm and peaceful state. So that.
Well, you're really making me.
But that would definitely be why I do this and why I feel good doing it.
You really made me think there. You can't become selfless until you become selfish and you have that self-fulfillment. And that's a really good contradiction. I think is completely true. But, Jared, we talked about all these different steps that you've been taking, whether in your life, good or bad, that are leading you to this answer. So what is that answer? And how now would you define what leadership is?
It's a good question. I don't think that our greatest leaders set out to lead in the first place. I think they get there. They grow into that role through their own experiences, and that they realize that sometimes something needs to be done and there's a void somewhere, and they realize that they have the skills, resources, abilities that can help improve a situation. So I think a leader is able to size up what's missing and is willing to move forward, even if it's uncomfortable for them to do so, to help fill. And when I say fill that void, it's filling a positive void. A leader knows how to, or doesn't even know how, but somehow exhibits the strength to move forward where progress is needed. And they do so despite being uncomfortable. Some people it maybe feel more natural to, but one way or another, they move forward and they're able to drive progress in that area, through their sheer will and through eventually building collaborative efforts with others so that it can become greater than just themselves. Because nothing lasts, I think, with just a single person or a single leader. It has to become a collaborative, effort. So a leader knows how to inspire that, or figures out, I go back and forth between knowing, figures out a way to get there. Because I don't think every leader knows. They don't know in advance that they're going to become a leader. They don't know in advance all the answers to getting there, but they're willing to take whatever steps, hard or easy, to improve upon the situation. And if they stick with it and have that work ethic to do it, I think they become a leader through the process. And then people look up to them and become inspired by their efforts.
Jared, well said. That was a great answer, and it's very consistent about what we've been talking about today. And I just wrote down 3 words. I just wrote down bigger than business. That's a big takeaway from me today, and kind of in terms of what's driving someone to do something, and really tad onto the point you just made about they don't set out to be leaders. They just do this inherently or intentionally. So Jared, I just want to thank you for coming on the show, taking your time to speak with a young, humble working folk like myself here in the new setup with the ping pong table out right here in San Diego, California. So lastly, for our audience, where can they find more information about Florida for Good? And any last words from Jerry Meyer?
Well, first, thank you for having me on here. I really appreciate it. By having me on this podcast, you do help spread the message of how business really can be used for good. Absolutely. And I greatly appreciate that. Also, hopefully I'll come to San Diego sometime and I can play you in a game ping pong.
Exactly.
Enjoy your new home.
We have beaches here too, you know.
Yes, I know, and they're beautiful. I have a very good friend that lives in La Jolla, and he moved out there because you actually have real waves there that we don't have.
Yeah, exactly.
But for people that want more information, www.floridaforgood.com is the best place to start. And you'll see all the businesses in Florida. I know there's over 100 on our directory right now that have signed up, that they're using their business for good. That's continually growing. From that website, you can also sign up for the impact assessment, the one offered by B Corp. We have a licensed version there. And for anyone that starts it, if you have questions, you can reach out to us and we'll help you through the process. All of our events are on there, and a lot of the how and why are on there to help people kind of figure out themselves if this is something that they want to do. They're interested in our resort operation, Legacy Vacation Resorts, legacyvacationresorts.com, and it would be saltpalm.com. And both of those are certified B Corps. They practice these principles every day, and they are encouraging everyone else in their industries to come on board and collaboratively work with us to use business for good.
Jared, thank you again for your time. Folks, if you're listening to this on audio, if you're in a business, you're not certified B Corp, if you're interested, go to floridaforgood.com. Check it out. Contact Jared. He'll help you out. He said that he's doing it out of his goodwill, his good time. And there's plenty of resources out there where you can, at least make a move towards being a force for good in that business for good altogether, holistic approach. Jared, thank you so much for your time.